Throughout Better Call Saul, one of Nacho's main obstacles was the Salamancas. He had a string of bad luck in that each time he got rid of one, another appeared, allowing him to never truly feel safe. In total, he had to overcome 5 different members of the Salamanca family. I thought it would be interesting to look at how he approached each of them. At the start of the series, Nacho is the right-hand man of Tuco. Interestingly, with Tuco, Nacho handles him in a very similar way to that of Walt in Season 2 of Breaking Bad. Walt immediately sees that when Tuco is angry, he doesn't react well to people speaking with a lack of clarity, and he also doesn't like hearing from people he doesn't respect.
It's not that, man. It's just, I don't do business that way.
Oh shit, the deal is done.
You said this was cool. Okay, money for meth, cash up front.
Front, dude, Tuco's good for it. I don't need you punk ass to vote for me.
This is not meth.
Money up front. Money up front. 1 pound is not gonna cut it. You have to take 2. Orderly.
The first thing Nacho did to overcome Tuco was earn that respect, seemingly done through playing into his ruthlessness, yet providing a calm sounding board for Tuco. This is one of the things we see out in the desert in Season 1 Episode 2 of Better Call Saul, when Jimmy attempts to lie about being a federal agent, and Nacho essentially calls him out, leading Jimmy to reveal the truth once more. Nacho is a person who talks Tuco down from situations that might otherwise land him in jail. Early days Nacho was far more ruthless, a seeming requirement when being the right hand of Tuco. Jimmy also quickly catches on to this, taking a calmer approach, complimenting Tuco, and remaining calm and clear with his words.
1 leg each. That total of 2 legs. They can't skateboard for 6 months, and they're scared of you forever. You show everybody that you are the man, but that you're fair.
That's tough. That's fair.
Both Jimmy and Walt also play up to Tuco's fairness, essentially giving him respect, which is also why he seems to listen to Nacho. Their respect goes both ways, but the way Nacho speaks to him is concise, respectful, and ultimately helpful.
Can I?
He said he was FBI. He admitted it.
You had your wire cutters on him. He would have said anything.
To take out the erratic and unpredictable Tuco, Nacho chose the calm and efficient Mike Ehrmantraut. Nacho's initial proposal to Mike is that he shoot Tuco after he leaves the restaurant. Mike then suggests a sniper instead, before finally deciding the whole thing is too risky, and a softer approach needs to be taken, as to not draw more cartel attention and potentially make the situation worse for them both. Mike caught on to how Tuco would react based on Nacho's story about his erratic behavior and his whole lie detector routine. To take Tuco down, they used his unpredictability and temper, but also withheld the calm voice of reason Tuco was used to having by his side in Nacho. In Mike's approach, he does everything that typically annoys Tuco. He acts bumbling and appears to lack awareness or intelligence. He knowingly aggravates and annoys him, and he turns his back on him multiple times, showing as little possible respect. This leads him to beat Mike bloody. A key turning point in this moment is where Nacho says to Tuco they need to go. If Nacho was still truly attempting to advise Tuco in this moment, he would have calmly persisted, knowing it would end badly. Instead, he takes the order right away and leaves. Nacho used his knowledge of what bothers Tuco, angering him with the help of Mike, then leaving him to stew in his anger, without a calmer voice of reason to guide him down and lead him away from a situation that would have bad consequences. After this, Tuco goes to prison, and we get the arrival of Hector. Hector being the current leader of the Salamanca family. Hector was the only Salamanca Nacho arguably didn't have to win over or play in any way. Hector is a character who doesn't really like anyone unless they also have Salamanca as their name. Even that is questionable. The way Nacho instead seemed to approach Hector was to actually downplay his potential and skill. Instead of showing he's capable, he shows he's not as capable as the Salamancas, essentially playing into Hector's own ego and suspicions. In some cases, he doesn't need to do anything to show this. There's a moment where Crazy 8 is short on money for the week, and Nacho lets him go. Hector begrudgingly tells him to go sort it.
Who works for who?
Clearly seeing Nacho as soft or weak. Nacho's more passive approach he learned to take with Tuco isn't as appropriate here. He's expected to be the Tuco, almost. Threatening and oppressive to those who do wrong by them.
I'll talk to him. He'll come around.
I don't trust him.
However, to take down the person who thinks so little of him, he requires a complicated plan, where he uses Hector's low image of him to his advantage, as to make the plan fly entirely under the radar, something that is very important, due to what would be the sudden takedown of a second Salamanca, and the head of the Salamanca family. In reality, getting Hector out of the picture takes the most effort to truly plan out, with Nacho's complicated and multi-part plan to switch his heart medication for sugar pills. There's a lot that could go wrong here, and the consequences would be dire. Nacho acts almost bumbling and foolish in many parts to execute his plan, which Hector thinks nothing of, shrugging it off like he expects as much. I guess in a way you could say this is fairly similar to how he approaches Tuco, or how Mike approaches Tuco really, in order to essentially put the Salamancas on a pedestal. It's also why Hector loses to Gus at almost every turn. He misjudges the capability of people, and generally thinks very little of anyone aside himself. One of the first steps to the plan is to clumsily drop the money by Hector's feet. He looks frustrated, but again expecting such a thing to happen. This then allowing Nacho to get close by him and snatch the pill bottle. Again using Hector's own bold lack of care, or expectations of his own men, to be anything aside something lesser than him. In order to initially get close to him, he also pretends he thinks a banknote is fake, allowing Hector to look at it, judge it, and decide it is indeed real. The fact that Nacho had to ask him to do this though, is just further reinforcing this idea that he isn't as capable as him, playing further into the plan. The plan is executed successfully, but is planned for meticulously over what seems to be weeks. To defeat Hector as it were, Nacho needed to think intelligently, taking him down as inconspicuously as possible, using the low respect and view Hector had of him, resulting in Hector and the Salamancas being none the wiser to Nacho's plan. Hector especially does not expect as much from Nacho, and instead immediately becomes suspicious of Gus. Gus finds out however, and Nacho is placed under the employ of Gus. He's forced to be his informant and the man on the inside. Gus sets up a plan to make it look like Nacho and Arturo were hit, leaving Nacho bloody, with multiple bullet wounds, and Arturo dead before the fact. The twins arrive and save Nacho with use of Caldera, the vet. To earn the respect of the twins was quite simple. Nacho simply had to prove his undying loyalty to them. Quite literally. When they go to wipe out the gang that the twins believe shot Nacho and Arturo to assert Salamanca dominance, Nacho initially remains in the car. His new role as Gus's informant and man on the inside means he realizes he has to take a little more action, and so gets out despite his many fresh wounds, to try and assist in any way he can. He enters a firefight he has no right being in, because he realizes the only way to win over two ruthless murderers is to help them murder. He doesn't get very far, but he does take out one guy. Despite this, he ultimately wins their respect, because the both of them realize that he's put his own life on the line to try and assist them, even if he didn't really do much. He proved to the twins that he wanted to exact revenge in the way they wished, in the typical Salamanca way too. This was one of the riskier plays, but ultimately one of the simpler ones to win the trust of a Salamanca. After this, the twins go back to Mexico, and the Salamancas seem comfortable leaving their operation in the hands of Nacho. As far as the twins are concerned, Nacho is a solid asset, able to push through his wounds, to take bloody revenge on those that wronged the Salamanca name. In one move he clears his own name, and any possible suspicion the twins may have of him, and further proves his worth to them beyond that, even visibly impressing them it seems. This respect even extends to Nacho's final moments in Season 6. During the shootout at the motel, they treat him with respect. Moments before his death, where he calls them psychos, they also seem kind of genuinely offended by it. It's worth remembering that in order to save Nacho, he was given Salamanca blood, making his betrayal from their perspective even more impactful. The way they saw it was that he was kind of one of them to an extent. Finally, we have the arrival of Lalo, a Salamanca unlike any other, so much so that Nacho doesn't even seem to initially realize that he is one. Lalo is a case where the way he was won over was by Nacho using the full extent of what he's learned. By the time Lalo has arrived, Nacho is an incredibly capable and resourceful criminal. In the case of Lalo, to defeat him, he just needs to get him in the right place for Gus to finish the job. Lalo has a bit of every Salamanca in him, so Nacho impresses him by proving he has the same skills that Lalo does. With both use of his past experiences with Salamancas, but also his own development throughout this time. He convinces him he's a worthwhile person to listen to, and leave in command in the north, winning his trust, welcomed into his home, and even being brought directly to Eladio. He shows his physical capability by retrieving the drugs in the midst of a police raid, leaping from rooftop to rooftop, Lalo's own physical capability being seen at different points, such as his leaping onto the car later on, or his climb through the vents in the travelware. He proves his intelligence and strategy through his destruction of the Poyas restaurant, and the hiring of Saul as their attorney, to get Crazy 8 out of prison. Lalo's own intelligence seen in his calculative mind, watching and waiting before he makes a move. Finally, Nacho shows Lalo respect, much like he did with Tuco, yet doesn't dismiss him in the same way. He underplays himself somewhat like he did with Hector, to prove Lalo is still better than him. Yet he is still equally capable. He realizes Lalo is too intelligent for any form of manipulation in that way, I think. He requires the calming voice of reason he gave to Tuco, the slight underplay of his ability to ego boost, as he did for Hector, and finally a clear commitment and ruthlessness that he showed during his brief period with the twins. All in all, it works. The Salamancas are highly distrusting, it seems, when it comes to their men. Hector Salamanca never trusted anybody. Tuco actively caused distrust through his rash behaviour, and the twins are, well, hard to read, but equally aren't as open to reason. Lalo was proven to feel the same way about his men, exposed through Kim in the episode Bad Choice Road, revealing to him that he needed people he could trust, which I imagine is in part why he looked to Nacho after this moment, deciding to take him south to meet Eladio, and embrace him into his family. He was the one man of the Salamanca operation he felt he could truly trust. Ultimately, it's a tragedy that Nacho couldn't get away in the end. He did everything right. He played Tuco correctly, dealt with Hector intelligently, proved his loyalty beyond doubt to the twins, and finally fully won the trust of Lalo. The times things went wrong were out of his hands. Hector replaced Tuco after his charge, making things worse. Gus resuscitated Hector after he switched out his pills. The twins, arguably nothing really went wrong there. If anything, the fact they left so soon, after him winning their trust, was more the issue. Then for Lalo, it was Gus's mercenaries that realistically messed up. Nacho took the call, let them in, he did everything he needed to rid himself of the Salamancas. But in the end, it wasn't enough.